everyone, it's Caroline. Thanks so much for joining me today. It has been a while since you've had an opportunity to join me. I just this year haven't posted that much on here because I haven't had like the time or inspiration really to post about books on YouTube, and that's fine with me. I've just, you know, life is busy and other things take over, but I realized that I haven't this year at all posted any videos about any books that I've read this year in 2022. And if you were around in 2021, you know that I did not have that great of a reading year, and this year is just going so much better. So I thought that I should give those books their time to shine. So it's May right now, but I think what I'm gonna do is just a wrap up of kind of everything that I've read in January through April of this year. So I know it's very popular to do kind of like quarterly stats and wrap ups. I kind of missed the mark to do that. So this is gonna be like trimesterly, just the first 4 months of 2022, some stats, and then I'm not gonna wrap up like every single book that I read because we'd be here forever, but I'll just go over some like hits and misses and things like that. So I'll go ahead and start with some stats. I'm gonna be looking down because this is, if you're interested, what my kind of journal spread looks like for my first trimester of the year. I don't know if it's interesting. It's not super fancy or anything. Maybe I'll try and take like zoomed in pictures of each section and like pop them up somewhere. But also maybe I won't do that. We'll see. Starting with just the total amount of books I read, it was 18. Going through a star rating breakdown, I gave 3 books 5 stars. I gave 11 books 4 stars. I gave out 3 3-star ratings, 0 2-star ratings, and then 1 1-star rating. Going and breaking down average age range, like target age range, I read 7 adult books, 7 young adult books, and then 4 middle grade books, which I think this plays out pretty well because my baseline every single month, I always try to prioritize reading at least 1 adult, 1 young adult, and then 1 middle grade book. So it would make sense that my lowest number is 4 in middle grade, and then kind of my spillovers are in adult and young adult. Okay, next we're gonna go into a genre breakdown. I never know how specific or how broad to go with genres because you can get super, super niche, or you can just encapsulate like a lot of mini subsects of genres within bigger genres. So I kind of just did what worked for me. I read 2 space/sci-fi books, and then I marked 7 books as speculative, which to me, speculative means a contemporary-ish setting with just some like otherworldly or magical elements. And then I read 3 true contemporary books, 1 historical fiction, 1 dystopian. I read 1 fantasy. It was like a retelling, like a Greek mythology retelling. So I guess if you would constitute that as fantasy, that's what I marked it as. 2 romance books and then 1 literary fiction book. So that, I think, if I did the math right, adds up to 18. But then I had like some special other categories that these aren't in addition to the genres that I just mentioned, but they're more just like some more specialty things added on top of the genres that I just mentioned. So I read 2 graphic novels that also fell into a genre that I already mentioned, and then I read 1 anthology and 1 book in verse, which you're gonna hear about very soon. I also thought that it would be interesting this year to track the way that I read the book, like the format that I read it, and these stats aren't necessarily shocking, but it is, I don't know, it's just interesting to see. So I read 13 books physically, 3 books on audio, and then 2 books on ebook. Those aren't like pure numbers because 9 times out of 10, I'll have a book physically, and then I'll also see if I can get the audio book and the ebook, just so that way I can be constantly reading it. So a lot of those physical books, I probably at some point listen to them on audiobook, or like the audiobooks, I would have had them physically at some point, but I just usually go with majority. So if I read the majority of it physically, then I counted it as physical, just because otherwise I wouldn't ever be able to track something like that. Okay, and then my last couple of stats, I don't even know if you can call them stats really, but I'm always interested to see why people pick up the books that they do, and any sort of like challenges that people assign themselves. This year for me in 2022, I'm trying to participate in Buzzwordathon, which was all started as a readathon from Kayla Books and Lala, and it's been adapted down to basically she just has a prompt for every single month of the year. I'll try and, if I remember, link her video where she explains it, and all of the prompts are based off of words in the title, which hence the name Buzzwordathon. So January, the prompt was to read a book that had one of the 5 W's in the title, so who, what, where, when, and why, and for that one I read When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. February, it was pronouns, so I read Me, in parentheses, Moth by Amber McBride. That ticked off the February prompt. For March, it was locations, and this one was a little difficult to complete. So I'm using Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessel. I read that in March, and Neverworld Wake technically is like a location. It's referring to a place that exists within the book itself. But if you don't think that counts, world is in Neverworld. So that could, like, the world is a location. So you could take it one of 2 ways. Also, it's me assigning it, so it counts for me both ways. And then April was supposed to be, or April, the prompt was big and little. I didn't have any books that worked for this on my TBR, and my rule for challenges like this is that I'm never going to like buy a book or necessarily like search for a book just so I could like tick off a prompt. Really, anything that's prompt based, I always want to try to pull from what I already have on my TBR, not add new things to my TBR just based on the sake of a challenge. I did read, one second. I did read this book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers in January. So I technically did complete the big and little prompt, just not in the designated month. And then my other kind of year-long challenge that I've set for myself is something that I started last year, which is reading all 10 of the Alex Award winners. So this year I'm reading the 2022 Alex Award winners. I have a couple of videos on the Alex Awards, but I'll link the one that I did this year where I kind of react to the award winners and I go through, I do a bunch of different things in that video. I don't know, it'll be linked. But there are 10 winners and I'm trying to read all of them this year in 2022. I've read 2 so far. One of them was, hold on, you'd think I'd be more prepared. I'm just not. Luckily, my beautiful book tree shelf is right here, so let me grab the 2 Alex Award winners really quick. First Alex Award winner that I read was this one, How Lucky by Will Leach, and then the second one was this one, Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. This was one of the graphic novels that I read in the first trimester of 2022, and I'm actually about to talk about the other graphic novel that I read as well. That brings us to the end of all of the stats that I have kept track of. I've really enjoyed keeping track of the things. Like, I think I have a good amount of categories and I'm going to continue to do that throughout the rest of 2022. I want to talk about my favorites that I had of the first 4 months of this year. And going back to my star ratings, I gave 3 books 5 stars, so I thought we could talk about what those 3 books were. The first one was this one, A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger. The second one I read in February, and I actually already mentioned it for the Buzzwordathon prompt. It was Me, Moth by Amber McBride. And then the third one I completed in April. I think this was one I completed like at the very end of April. And it's This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews. And this is another graphic novel, which Oh my gosh, okay, where do I even want to start with these books? I'll run through and pitch them each to you really quick. A Snake Falls to Earth by Darcy Little Badger is a book that kind of bridges from middle grade to young adult. There's two different perspectives in here. One of the perspectives is Nina, who is a young Lipan, I think it's Lipan Apache girl living in Texas. And then the other character perspective is Ollie, who there's like a certain name for what he is in the book. Ollie is a cottonmouth kid from the land of spirits and monsters. So there's two, at first at the beginning, those two characters are existing in their separate worlds. Nina's is this world, although I would say that if you read it, like one of my favorite parts about reading Nina's perspective is you could tell it's very much set in our world, but it's also a little bit maybe like just near future or a little dystopian. There's some like elements that are woven throughout that just, I don't know, it's not exactly in this time period. And then the other one, Ollie, exists in a parallel world to ours, and I think that a good way to describe it is the land of spirits and monsters. So Ollie is a cottonmouth snake who has the ability to take on the form of a human as well, a young boy, and everyone that exists within Ollie's world has the ability to do that. So they have a human form and then also an animal form as well, and we get to meet just so many lovely characters that have that ability and come into contact with Ollie as well. Each Nina and Ollie kind of have different separate missions that eventually bring them together, and I have such a hard time. I've recommended this book to so many people since I've read it, and I have every single time just such a hard time kind of grasping what it was that made me adore this book so much. And I actually think that I'm going to try and save it for after I pitch this one to you, because although these stories aren't necessarily similar, the reasons that I loved them are similar. So let's really quick talk about this one. This was our Pact by Ryan Andrews. This, I would say, is pretty solidly in the middle grade age range. And like I said, it's a graphic novel with just some of the most beautiful artwork that I've ever seen. I love the color palette of this, like this, sort of like dark nighttime starry sky blues and like light blues and deep blues. And your basic pitch for this one, at the very beginning of the story, there is a group of boys and there's some sort of festival, the Autumn Equinox Festival, where basically every single year this town puts lanterns in a river that runs through their town, and the boys make a pact to ride their bikes and follow the lanterns until, I'm trying to show you it on the cover, follow the lanterns until they discover where the lanterns go. And pretty quickly in the beginning, one by one, the boys kind of start breaking the pact. They start turning back for home. There's a new addition to the group, a boy that joins them even though he was not invited to join them. And then basically by the end, there's two of them left. It's about their adventure, seeing if they can complete the pact and finding out where the lanterns end up. And along the way, they meet some beautiful, wonderful, fabulous characters. There is a bear that is also trying to accomplish something with the lanterns. There's this kind of like crazy, nutty, mad professor scientist woman. Between these two, again, very different stories, but if I could make like a list of books that I needed when I was younger, these two would fall like at the very top of that list. Like books that kind of healed my inner child. They were just so warm and delightful. Both of these, I would also say, like trying to assign a genre to them is hard because they both have speculative elements, but these are two adventure stories. Like they're just about kids having these adventures, and it's no secret that with me, I prefer, like I love an emotionally devastating book. Both of these books hit me in my emotions so hard, but none of them had like traumatic events. None of them were like super emotionally devastating. It was just kind of these conflicts and watching these kids trying to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. Just, I don't know, it still was emotionally not devastating, but like gripping for me, just in very different ways from like books that actually intend to be emotionally devastating. Does that make sense? I don't know. And speaking of emotional devastation, let's talk about my third and final 5-star that I've had this year, which is Me Moth by Amber McBride. This is a young adult novel in verse, and it's focusing on our main character, Moth. It's told from her perspective. She semi-recently lost all of her family in a devastating car accident that she was in as well. She's living with her aunt. Her aunt ends up abandoning her, and she meets this new boy at school who also is going through some hardships with their family. So they basically have this very deep and instant connection, and because of that connection, they both decide to run away together, and the story kind of chronicles them exploring their own pasts and histories and traumas, and then kind of learning about each other through that. And they're on a road trip through the US while doing this. This is, I think, the only book written in verse that I've ever given 5 stars and that has ever had this profound of an effect on me. And I've read lots of good novels in verse. I often find with novels in verse, like, I love them so much, but I can't ever really lose my mind, like give 5 stars to them, because I always just feel like because there's less words on the page, we don't get to know the characters as fully. This one, however, this author, I think this is her debut book, and I do not understand how she wrote what she wrote. Talking about emotional devastation, not only in the plot, clearly both of these characters are going through really hard circumstances, but also the writing, the way this author writes. I mean, I felt so many lines in my chest. And do you ever read something and you just feel your heart kind of like implode? That's what happened with this author's writing, not just like a few times, but I'm talking about like on every single page. I feel like this is a book that so many people would love. I hesitate, like I know a big young adult novel in verse writer is Elizabeth Acevedo, who I've loved. I've read all of her books and I've loved them. I hesitate to compare the two authors' writings just because both of them are beautiful, but in very different ways. I do feel like that if you liked Elizabeth Acevedo's stories, that you will like this one like just as much, if not even more. And I really want more people to pick it up. I feel like in like my niche on Instagram of like teacher book lovers, it's gotten some traction, but I want it to get like a larger scope just because I feel like it has such a big appeal. I will say with Me Moth, don't read the Goodreads synopsis, and I don't have a physical copy, so I can't read like the inside cover synopsis either, but I would say just avoid any and all synopsis because there's some spoilery things that go on, and I just think it's better off if you go in not knowing those things. So that's been the reading year so far in 2022. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope that you enjoyed hearing some stats and about some of my favorites so far in 2022. I would love to know what how many did I mention? 3? Do you have like a top 3 that you've read so far in 2022? I hope that wherever you are having a fantastic day, and I love and appreciate you so much. Bye.